fathers have a leading responsibility, not the only responsibility, but a leading responsibility in raising children. The way I like to say it is this. If there's a problem at the Piper household in child raising, and Jesus knocks at the door at 1801 11th Avenue, and Noel goes to the door, Jesus is going to say, "Hello, Noel. Is the man of the house here? We need to talk." Even if it's her fault. I mean that. He will look to me first for the big picture, the moral vision, the setting, how I've worked with that issue. We men will give an account in a special way. A leading, not a sole, but a leading responsibility. I bear it. You fathers bear it with me. Now, just to make sure we get the whole picture of the flow of the chapter and it feels coherent, realize that this is simply an extension of the headship mentioned in 523 and 525. Let me read that again, and you'll remember it from previous messages. 523, we're at 6:1, we're going back to 523. The husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. Husbands, I'm down in verse 25 now. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Now, God doesn't say to the husband, "I call you to bear the sacrificial, crucifixion-like burden of responsibility and relationship to the leading of this woman," and then turn around and say, "And woman, you've got the responsibility to lead the kids." He doesn't say that. It's men responsible primarily both ways, and women partnering to see that vision through with her unique gifts and calling. So this is big, men. We were told to be Christ-like lovers and leaders of our wives, and then we're now being told to be Christ-like lovers and leaders of our children, partnering with our wives who have an absolutely unique and precious role in this rearing with us. So, here we are at verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, simply extending the leadership of man over his wife to the leadership of the children. What does it mean? What's a man to do? Someday perhaps we'll give a whole series on parenting. This is not it. This is marriage. And I'm simply arguing that marriage means having and raising children. It's not all about parenting. Therefore, as I thought about what I should say on this one last Sunday before we turn next time to the whole issue of divorce and remarriage, what should I say to fathers who are husbands, living out their husband role in relation to children? And I thought I would unpack all 3 parts, 4 or 5 parts of verse 4. Don't provoke your children to wrath. Bring them up in the discipline and the admonition of the Lord. That's about 5 sermons. So I gave up trying to pack all that in, and we're just going to talk about anger and why Paul said what he said at the beginning of this verse. So here we are, chapter 6, verse 4. He does not begin his focus on telling them what to do, but what not to do. So fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Does that strike you as amazing? That of all the things he could have warned fathers about, just think of them. I listed about 10. He could have said, don't discourage your children. Don't pamper your children. Don't tempt them to covet with stuff. Don't tempt them to lie by setting up situations like that. Don't tempt them to steal. Don't abuse them. Don't neglect them. Don't set a bad example for them. Don't manipulate them. And he didn't say any of that. He said, don't provoke them to anger. Does this strike you as amazing? So I ask, why? Of all the things he could have warned us dads not to do, seemingly more serious than this is what he picks. Why? Well, he doesn't tell us why. So I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess on the basis of my wider knowledge of the Bible, and Ephesians in particular, and I'm going to guess on the basis of experience. Those are the two things I bring to life. Bible and life. I've had some life. I've had some Bible. I try to think biblically. So here's my guess. Number one, there are two of them. Two reasons why I think he's zeroing in on anger. Number one is because anger is the most common emotion of the sinful heart when it confronts authority. Anger is the most common emotion of a 2-year-old heart when it confronts, no, you don't do that. They're called tantrums when they're 2, and when they're teens, they may slam the door, or worse. Nobody likes to meet authority that contradicts my will. I want to do what I want to do. And if you won't let me do what I want to do, I get mad. So I'm thinking Paul's saying, here's Dad. He, just by being, represents limits and authority. Here's this little sinner, born that way. And one of the first things he learns is, Dad limits me. Of course, he ought to be feeling a lot of other things about Dad too, but he knows that one. And therefore, anger begins pretty early as Dad limits. So, Paul's thinking, if it's just going to happen in the best of parenting, then don't do anything, Dad, that would cause any unnecessary anger. There's going to be plenty without that. That'd be my first guess. It's just so built into the structure of sin meeting authority that dads need to be told, you don't need to work at this. You don't need to do anything. Don't do anything to use your authority, to use your moral vision to cause unnecessary anger. Second reason. This may be the more profound and serious one. Anger is of a special concern to Paul, and we will go back and see how much time he spent on it in chapter 4. Remember? Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor be put away from you with all malice. It was a fighter verse about 4 weeks ago. Paul is really worked up and concerned about anger in the church and now anger in the home. And perhaps